So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today of all days to engage this content with me. The invitation of this space is to explore something that I think we all know, that all of our ancestors knew, that we are beings who are, in a sense, in charge of the currency of the sacred in this world. There's many indigenous narratives about what humans are for in the ecology of consciousness. And within that context, there's an insight that our consciousness is a resource that is here to flow in the between and nurture the sacred, both in ourselves and the world. And so that is my impetus for offering this is both to empower, inspire, activate the self-generating impulse towards ritual for oneself and for others, and also to tune that activation with what I perceive to be an emergent and ancient awareness of what humans are for and what human consciousness is for in the greater ecology of life, which is an ecology of consciousness and soul. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'll build that up for us a bit today and then get into the keys that I promised to speak about. We're going to go through a little bit of a framing for how to see, and then we'll explore what is ceremony, and then we'll get into the 5 keys. So we're going to start with 4 keys to seeing from the perspective of wholeness, from the perspective of the world being sacred. And they're very simple. Everything is what it is. Elizabeth, you'll recognize these from George. These 4 come from my teacher, also Elizabeth's teacher, George Grey Eagle Bertelstein, through the Lakota lineage. George is a Bertelstein. He is a brilliant Jewish ceremonialist who carries Lakota medicine. And these are his translations of some very core principles of indigenous ways of seeing. So the first is everything is what it is, which is massively disruptive if you actually take it seriously. You could also frame that as the thing is the thing. So when we enter into sacred space or ceremonial space, we don't first see something as a metaphor. We see it as itself. So we wouldn't say a human is a biological machine. We would say a human is a human, or a bird is a bird. Water is water. A machine is a machine. To meet the thing as it is and then get to know it on its own terms is the gateway to opening up deep connection with it, whether that's self, other, world, and in all of its specificity, the eagle feather, the water, the crystal. To get to know the energetics that things hold is to meet them as themselves. Another way to explore that is it steps out of a scientific materialist view that says the thing is the data we know about it, and invites us into like a very primary relationship with anything as a way to elevate our relationship with it. The next principle is that everything is connected. Everything is connected. There are no things that are not entangled with other things. No thing exists but by virtue of its interconnectivity with everything else. And so that, as a way of seeing, is a way of exploring how any action, any thought, any prayer, any process is entangled with the rest of the world that thing or process is nested within, which also is a foundation for making prayers. The 4th lens or way of seeing is that everything is sacred, as opposed to there are some things that are sacred and some things there are not. Anything, you could also say it as anything can be sacred and is made more sacred by our recognition of it. So entering into a ceremonial space is to open to the possibility of seeing all things as sacred, knowing all things as sacred, and being that which recognizes the sacred. Which would also be in contrast to some worldviews where the sacred is something set apart and unique, and not accessible. It's intercessed by other. In this frame, it is intercessed by our own recognition, and there is no intercessor other than the self. And there's one more here, and then I'll add a fifth one. The next one is that everything is a change. Change is eternal. Change is the constant. We don't come to ceremony to have things be the same. We come to ceremony to engage change, which is happening anyway, but to collaborate with that river that is always merging. And the last, which could be framed as one thing or two, is that the place of power is here and the moment of power is now, where all of this starts here. Which again is a principle of, you could say, of indigenous ways of knowing, but the way I approach ceremony is that we are anchoring that which we're doing into the world that we are participants within. So what is a ceremony? Why might we want to do ceremony? To me, a ceremony is an amplified participation in the ecology of consciousness. It's a choreography of actions designed to harmonize all those participating in the ceremony and the world that it's nested within. I work with a technical definition of ceremony, that a ceremony isn't a ceremony unless it's oriented towards the coherence or elevation or harmonization or sacralization, both of the people within the ceremony and of the world that that ceremony is nested within. So there's like a membrane that the ceremonialist is holding that is both an intention for world and an intention for those in the ceremony, whether that's just you or you and another person or you and a group. And that intentional field is a field of holding. And then I think of ritual more colloquially as kind of like a smaller subset, and a ritual may not include that intention of world. A ritual could be something like recognizing your morning coffee as sacred and giving gratitude for the chain of events, or giving a blessing at a meal, which does connect to the world, but it's a little more casual. Does anyone have any questions based on those frames?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if it would be okay to ask a question. I'm just wondering, so you said it's, you're holding this membrane between the people, the individuals who are participating, and then the world within which the group is. So I'm curious about how that world within which the group is different from group to group, because if it's just the larger, then it's always the larger. It's always the ultimate, could be the ultimate existential reality is the larger. Or do you make any distinctions between that larger world within which the group is based on context, or does it even matter?
Oh, that's a extremely rich question. I love that question. I think of existence in holons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in that sense, certainly there is a holon that is the planet. There are often holons that are groups or initiatives or endeavors. And then also the holon could be the entirety of the cosmos, the entirety of the totality. I tend to think of evolutionary process in consciousness as a little bit more local than the cosmos as a whole. And that's through my own perception. And it's a great question that I think could be clarified by the given intent of the ceremony. and sometimes is very clarified, like you said, that it relates to different groups as well.
And I imagine based on how much the group is explicit about what frames they are sitting with, and if there's a shared frame, if there's a shared context, then I could imagine that there might be a tighter hold on describing. And if not, I also wonder, how does that impact the process, the ritual, the ceremony, if there isn't that express alignment, or there isn't that expressed congruence that gives you a sense of what is the world that is being held by this collective.
That's right. I mean, I love that you're tracking that, because that's one of the reasons why I name it in the first place, because I perceive that many people are entering into ceremony without a conscious relationship between the container and the world that there is an orientation towards.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think in general that's one of the great confusions for human consciousness right now. But then we're engaging ceremony of various kinds. And yeah, I'm very much in the psychedelic space. So there's a lot of engagement of ceremony. And then there isn't a why or a wherefore or a world that this is going towards very often. And that's a missed opportunity. But B, it's like a mismatch in terms of what it is to truly hold the container and nurture people into a healed world. Like if we are doing psychedelics to solve the mental health crisis, but doing no work on, well, what world would be a culture of wholeness where people could come home to, where we don't keep breaking the world and ourselves over and over again. There are obvious invocations of a world of peace. And then there's this extremely pluralistic process of fleshing out a vision of what world we might be building towards, right? And I think that inquiry is like a greater inquiry for our time, that could be also engaged in the process of ceremony. Like sometimes I often do a thing called a council round in ceremony, where we actually explore the nascent visions of the world we're praying with, and that tunes and textures, also the power dynamics, where I'm not then defining that world, where we're co-sensing into the world that might be or wants to be or is already nascently present. There's more I could say about how I invoke world, but I think what's interesting is that there's many ways to do that. And then, as you said, that depending on the intentional field of creating the container, that often, that has its own shape. One of the examples I got to lead, and I'm going to get to lead another one, a private ceremony for a group of Buddhist animal rights activists, who are some of the very high level and very, very hardworking food justice, animal rights, taking down the factory farming industry people that I know on the planet. They're very active. And their work is known by a lot of people. And like being in that field, like the world that we were nurturing also then worked on me, is still working on me, and it's a year and a half later. And that interface between that is partly, I think ceremony actually should start to create world centrism. It should take people beyond self-centrism as an ethical stance for why we do ceremony and what ceremony is about. That nesting ceremony just in the context of a culture of individualism and self-interest makes no sense at all. So thank you for that question. It's beautiful. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions, any comments?
I'd like to park this. I don't want to take the time, but I'd just love maybe if you could come back to it at the end. which is so moving from self-centrism to world-centrism, could also, I could imagine that people create this boundary between us and them. So it's you move from self to the world, but my world is my people, not the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just park this for later, maybe at the end of the call, where I'd love for you to speak to how do you support that expansion. It's not just because we're all living in us and them in so many ways. I have my tribe, and that tribe could be more esoteric. They're different from on normal, ordinary people, which is also pretty exclusionary, even though we might have an idea that we are more evolved. From there to even the most basic us and them that we see today. So, yeah, if you can park that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I'm going to invoke the One Life Circle, in which I'm sitting in front of my altar, and I'm going to invoke the One Life Circle. That's where I come from in creating ceremony. And so let us invoke the circle of life to which we all belong. In this space, in the space that the world that I'm co-authoring, we put life at the center of our practice and prayers, and the intentional field is to restore intimacy with and belonging with life. We tend that with love, light, realization, healing, authenticity, the whole journey of the wash cycle of unearthing what's in the way and claiming the path forward. And the specific zones that we work to create intimacy with and belonging to, or restore that intimacy with and belonging to, are the zones of self, family, these are the candles around the altar, community, and place. I didn't plan on sharing all of that in today. This is kind of like how much of this could we maybe learn in an hour and a half kind of experiment. So let's see what happens. But the insight, each one of those zones is a zone where, and there's other versions of this, of where we war, where we perpetuate separation, where we continuously enact the cycles of trauma, both personal and familial and structural and epigenetic, that persist in pain, in dysfunction, in not being able to fully enact the gift that is life. So the assumption that we invite in this space is that life is a gift, and that the whole cycle of ceremony is oriented towards restoring the intimacy with and belonging to and co-creativity with that gift. So welcome to the One Life Circle, the circle of life to which we all belong. So here are the keys, the 5 keys to creating ritual. And there's like a lot of layers to each one of them. The first key is to create a safe and sacred setting. This starts before the ceremony by setting up a clear intentional field that has a clear invitation, a clear beginning, a good time, a good space. Before you begin the ceremony, make sure you have everything you need for afterwards. Make sure there are no interruptions. So everything for afterwards, you might need food, you might need water, you might need warmth, you might need comfort. All of those things matter to do in advance. Then you make sure there are no interruptions. If there are housemates or animals or extenuating circumstances, you create, as much as you can, a space that is grounded and free of interruptions. The next one that's like really obvious, but not so obvious, is that you want to have a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear ending. There's this kind of sweet irony of entering into kairotic space, entering into kairotic time, which is the kind of time that functions timelessly, you could say, and also according to natural cycles and seasons. And as you enter into that, you want to begin that cleanly, engage a clear middle, and then engage a clear ending. In the ceremonies that I lead, we have 3 rounds. We have a gratitude round, a healing round, and a sharing round, and then some things that happen at the end that close things. That's the general frame that I work with. But the middle could have many stages. It could be an entire odyssey. In many traditional Indigenous Native American ceremonies, there are 4 rounds to ceremonies. You could have only 1 round that has a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear end. But when you're facilitator and guiding a ceremony, you, in a sense, you're the facilitator. You're the one performing, and the host, the one creating an arc that people's psyche can track. So that dimension really matters. Depending on the world, the people there, and the world you are working with, that arc could be different. Very different. That arc could, the middle could just be silence, being with what is.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Mm-hmm.
Just checking, when you say ceremony, what kind of ceremony are you talking about? Absolutely anything, or are you talking about like a medicine journey specifically, or?
Great question.
It could
I
be a
would say
celebration.
my come from is medicine ceremony more primarily. In the recent years, my come from is also 20 years of guiding a thing called Dancing Freedom. That's a movement-based ceremony that moves through. The middle is 5 elements, and it's a movement wave, and the ending is a very clear harvest process. The beginning is a whole invocation and prayer and circle. So it can be really any ceremony. And it's interesting. I trained hundreds of people in the methodology of Dancing Freedom. And as I observed people kind of stepping into space holding, like, beginning is hard if you don't think about creating a clear beginning. Ending can get really diffuse if you're not really clear that there is a calling for like the circle to be closed so it can keep going. You know, the kind of pagan saying is, I often end with, let the circle be open but not unbroken. And so it is. You know, I have a sequence that we'll get to in a minute, but that's the sequence is irrelevant. The clarity, or not as relevant, the clarity is really important. Because I think of it, of any facilitation really, but also a ceremony as a container where you're making space potentially for change, and how you nurture that process really matters. Yeah, it's a great question. So my current come from predominantly is guiding medicine ceremonies, but I also am called on to guide group ceremonies for not medicine driven spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I know that Chelsea, who's here, guides movement-based things too, and so that's relevant there. So the next key to that safety is this kind of balance between when we enter ceremony, we're entering into what the Greeks called kairotic time. We're entering into a space that is the time of trust, the time of bodies, the time of love, the time of natural cycles. In some traditional ceremonies, the kairotic wave of the whole ceremony goes from sunset to moonrise to sunrise, and tracks the entire prayer according to the cycle of the night, which is one of the most mind-blowingly beautifully aligned kairotic cycles that I've ever participated in. At the same time, as the guide, you're working with Chronos, you're working with clock time. And you're working with people's contemporary cares about, like, will this be done on time? When will this be done? How much do I need to listen to? And so that's an aspect of creating a safe space, is having the capacity to track and care for, unless you've agreed not to collectively, Chronos, which is linear time, at the same time as you're entering into timelessness. The next piece of creating a safe and sacred setting is to care for the body, the mind, and the heart. And what that means is to speak for and care for. It means that bodies need to be comfortable, need to be honored. I'm a huge stand for ceremonies being kind to the body. There's a lot of traditional practices that are oriented otherwise, and I've been in them and they have validity. But I feel that there's some dimension of, like, stepping into a more embodied culture that wants to create spaces that are kind to the body, and sometimes very embodied, that sometimes invoke and welcome the wisdom of the body being part of the intelligence that is expressed in the process, and the healing that is expressed in the process. I have also found over the years that the absence of clear explanations can also create a lot of unsafety for people who are more left-brained. So creating really clear why descriptions, and that are sometimes maybe grounded in scientific neuroscience or physics, or the current alignment of heavenly bodies, that is not just an astrological narrative, but is also an astronomical narrative, can be very helpful for a lot of people these days. And the last is speaking for the heart, speaking for the emotional body. Safety needs emotional intelligence. It needs trauma sensitivity. And the last key there is to welcome the soul. Soul is the uniqueness of a thing in relationship to all other uniquenesses. And the invitation that I like to make in ceremony is to taste and touch and welcome forth the very subtle uniqueness that makes each of us ourselves. Not from a place of ego, but from a place of unarmored soul, of unarmored expression of this subtle uniqueness, this verb of you that is unique in all the universe. There's two more principles to creating a safe and sacred setting. One is no destination to a ceremony. We live in a world driven by goals, and ceremonies don't have goals. They open to what is and to emergence without a set destination. One of the kind of common errors of people holding space is that they really want to get somewhere, and then the thing that could happen doesn't happen. And the Zen principle of nothing extra. Sometimes all you need is a lit candle or a rose or a timer. And so those are the keys for creating a safe and sacred setting. The last obvious one there is to invoke the energies and or directions and or ancestors and or guides and or guardians that you were called to invoke. I don't like to codify that, but I do like to invite it. It goes back to the principle of the anchoring the place that the ceremony is grounded in. We can do ceremony from the lens of transcendence. I'm just opening the questions. I can review, yes. I can review the soul part for sure. When it comes to I'll go through sequentially.
I'm going to ask a quick functional question if that's
Yes.
okay. Do you have notes? I mean, because I'm writing notes like crazy, and it's odd in a way. I'd like to be just dropping in and feeling into it. So I'm torn a little between those two things.
I do have notes, and I'm happy to send them out. I edited them today, so they could be sent out if you want them.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of delivering this. It's worth saying, like, I'm very new to delivering online courses, and so I'm learning, and I'd welcome feedback at another time to your experience. It's a very new space for me, and I'm happy to share the notes with you. To respond to the ask of the Elizabeth's question about the soul, there's a lot of layers to how I could answer that question. My experience and perception since I've on my journey is that the polarity between either you're in your ego or you're not, you're in presence, doesn't cover all the bases. It covers a process of sublimation of our identification and our attachment to like default identity and the protector controller quadrant of our personality, and sets us up to be able to stand in presence in a way that is like absolutely critical. But it isn't the whole thing we came here for. We came here to be humans and to be uniquely ourselves and to express uniqueness. So the definition I offered is soul is that which makes a thing uniquely itself. Soul is the uniqueness of a thing in relationship to all other uniquenesses. And in that, uniqueness is evolving as all those uniquenesses are in relationship to each other. So this is an immanent view of spirituality. And you could also say it's a view that takes seriously that the thing we incarnated for is not arbitrary. We're not just here to like jump from matter to immateriality. We're actually here to co-evolve the miracle of this gift that is life on earth. And by fully grounding into that and starting to unearth things like what gives you joy, the sound of your voice when it's truly grounded in your own body, the unique matrix of things that you care about and feel strong feelings about and notice. Like that's uniqueness is subtle. It's not the same thing in a meaningful way as ego. And we could get into all kinds of technical definitions there, but what I want to offer is this, like, to me, ceremony is about liberating that and invoking that. And like your incredible olive oil post, just like who else would have posted that? Elizabeth has been inviting people to put money in to buy Palestinian olive oil from the last remaining olive field in Palestine. And you noticed that you that, like, we could say that that's a piece of the song of your uniqueness expressing itself in relationship to all other uniquenesses, giving other people opportunity to be responsive to that. And so I'm very passionate about how ceremony, especially group ceremony, can create space where there is unity, there's dissolution of separateness, dissolution of our identification with our differences, whether they are racial or age or parent-child, or and also where there's like celebration of our uniqueness. And a lot of my work over the last years has focused on embodied community-based work, embodied community-based ceremony. And I find that, like, nurturing those two things, where do we set down our attachments, our fixations, our you could say resistance to our interbeing, so that we can all be one human family together. And then also, how do we like really track and care for the subtle uniqueness that each ring brings in the symphony, or the ecology of consciousness, you could say, or the symphony of soul. So invoking that is both empowering and in a way disruptive. And clarifying, because I think people get a little bit stuck. I think there's an innate cognitive dissonance between work to kind of get rid of the ego and work to be empowered. And yet most of the time we're holding them in the same place, and the discourse we hold about them rarely adds up. And if you bring soul into the picture, then it starts to all add up. Like, oh, the true self, or you could say what I like to call the no self, has no identity. And the soul self is this subtle fabric of uniqueness that each one of us incarnate, that continues to evolve as the universe evolves, as evolutionary process continues. So thank you for that question. Another aspect of that grounds, it overlays with a lot of traditional indigenous practices, but I would say my main teacher in this is Bill Plotkin, who's a Western archetypal nature-based therapist, founder of the Animus Institute, is that we often discover soul in relationship to nature, because everything is ensouled, because uniqueness is expressing itself in relationship to uniqueness. And so the quieter we get and the more open we become to a reflective field that is very essential, the more we become available to receive that. So, you know, a ceremony of welcoming the soul may be distinct from other kinds of ceremonial processes. I've led 12 vision quests. That's a huge part of vision quest practice, is this recognition of intersubjectivity that reflects that which is essential about this one. You know, as we become unarmored and meet that which is essential about, you know, the tree that's holding the space in your vision circle, or the bear who decides to come and sit down right next to you and stare at you. That didn't happen to me. That did happen to a really extraordinarily bear-like person in one of my vision quests. Yeah, amazing. I've seen amazing things happen. I've seen water snakes come and just sit with just the women. And yeah, amazing things. So that's an insight there that is also a nature-based insight. So shall we move on? Okay. So the next key for ritual of the 5 keys that may not be a key for everyone's rituals here. So I'm bringing this in because it's a key to my rituals, is how to pray. And the very simple way that I have learned to pray is to offer gratitude in an unarmored and simple way speak directly to what you are struggling with, if you're struggling, and ask very cleanly for help. That's really distinct from practices where we would say, may this happen, may I please have this. It's very direct. Thank you for this life, for this moment, for these 6 people, myself included, converged here on this video, that we have this opportunity to share this content together. And in this little moment, build community together. I'm not tracking a thing I'm struggling with right now, but I would like help to deliver this content beautifully in a way that is useful to you. So that is an example of how to pray. The insight about tense is interesting. What I've tracked over time, the frame I just offered is what's called a clear and simple prayer. It's also from George. Thank you. I'm struggling. Help me. And you can carry that forward into future actual. I'm so grateful for this incredible experience we've shared together, that I'm so grateful that we're sharing it now. What an exquisite experience. Thank you. The simplicity grounds into what can be felt, and what can be felt is the doorway to opening the frequency of prayer. That's an insight from Greg Braden, translated from the Aramaic. I'm not always sure that Greg Braden's Aramaic translations are rigorous, but the insight that comes out of the ancient teachings, that it is in present tense that we are most vibrationally powerful, that is mirrored by the work that HeartMath has done. So that's how to pray. The next key is attunement, is open attention to your own body and the body of the room, the body of the space, the body of the moment. Attunement is an open attention, a listening. I think listening for me is the best synonym when held with the whole being, with the whole body, with all of your bodies, to attunement, and constantly navigating that to stay in connection, in feeling yourself and in feeling other is the next key. Thomas Hubel brings so beautifully, I feel you feeling me. And just that interiority of, do I feel you feeling me? That the pause of attunement that opens attention to see if there is a mutuality of felt sense. To further unpack a little bit about what he offers in his healing collective trauma framework, in that attunement, you are not immediately going for coherence. He offers like this wonderful, wonderful frame of like creating field, that often field is disharmonious, and that the thing you're actually seeking to do in attuning is just create enough safety for resonance to arise. That resonance doesn't necessarily mean coherence. In other words, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone agrees or feels like they're coming from the same place, or even feels like totally connected with each other, but at least they feel like they can be safe together. They can be there together in a way that is open enough to be. Attunement is also a foundation for empathy. And if you're leading group process, part of the skillfulness of leading that group process is creating enough connectivity, attunement, listening in the room, that people start to feel each other. That is pure magic. The next key is communion. Communion is the flow of common union, the flow of conscious inner being between two or more subjective entities. Communion can be between people. It can be with a world. It could be with a tree, with a hummingbird, a flame. Communion recognizes the intelligence in other as meaningful. And this communion, in the frame that I'm offering in terms of ceremony being an organized to tend the world that it occupies, is a practice of immanence. It's a practice of relationship and nurturing the relationship between things and people and beings. It's very different than a lot of Eastern practices, which is it's a distinction that's worth offering. It's a conversation I've been very deeply in with my meditation teacher, that to recognize the uniqueness of other is kind of a layer of distinction more specific than seeing something as awareness, aware of awareness. That there's this very, very subtle, like you could say, descent into specificity that arises in communion with another person, with your cat. And that it's one of the keys to ceremony is to awaken this deep sense of the dialogic process between beings. I can offer an example, an instance of being in a ceremony where I was going through a ton of sexual trauma. And my teacher brought a buffalo robe. George brought a buffalo robe. And, said to me, "It's time for you to meet this buffalo," and wrapped it around me. And in that meeting, and this me recognizing that this was the massive, heavy, warm skin and fur and energy of this great being that had given its life and its skin to this space, there was like this communion with this buffalo that allowed all this trauma, all the trauma to just melt out of my body, all the chronic pain to just melt out of my body. And there's a practice that I sometimes guide people to, which is to like find the being who is speaking to you so that you can cultivate that relationship and learn to cultivate that. So the last of the 5 keys is how to close the container with integrity and grace. And what is important in closing is a certain kind of simplicity, which goes back to setting up a safe container and honoring Chronos and honoring Kairos. One of the things that can also happen when closing a container is you kind of latch into everyone's goodbye anxiety or ending anxiety, and it goes on forever, which is not a good recipe for clean, clear neurophysiological management of safety. So one of the things that is very important with closing a container is simplicity and finality. And I usually close a container by saying, thank you. We release these energies for the benefit of all beings. The Sanskrit prayer, Loka Samasta, Sukhino Bhavantu, is a beautiful prayer to say there. In Lakota, we would say Mitakuye and Mitakuye which means basically the same thing. That was for all beings. That was for everyone. We offer that to everyone. And then you carry on to the next thing. Whether that thing is hugging people and then making a meal, or hugging people and then hanging out, or hugging people and then taking a break, or not hugging people and transitioning to go swimming. But that ending really matters. So those are the keys. And now I'd love to open to questions and open to inquiry here around doing ceremony yourself. How can I best support you to enact ceremony for yourself?
Well, I would be inspired to say, can we do a ceremony, beginning, middle, and end?
Right now.
Yes.
We could consider that. It's a good question.
I feel like that's the best way in my
Mm,
learning approaches, I
beautiful.
could get it.
We can, actually. It's a great.
It's just one idea.
I must
Yeah.
say that was an assumption I had when I came in, that that there would actually be a ceremony and then you would be speaking to that. So that would I would welcome that. And I have to alert that I need to leave 10 minutes before the end. So just letting you know, because I stuck this in the middle of things, and because I really wanted to meet you and to
Thank you.
participate.
I have I have exactly that same situation too.
Okay. Are there other questions that I should track, or should we hold them? We could hold them until the end. Okay, so first there is Chronos. We have exactly 25 minutes to do this.
25-minute ceremony.
Now we're going to invoke Kairos. Oh, I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to welcome you all into the circle of, into the one life circle, into the circle of life to which we all belong. And to invite, this is a very simple prayer ceremony for each of our lives, with an intention that the prayers we make here both support our own lives, and that they support a prayer for there's so many things we could pray for with our world right now. I'd like to invoke a prayer for the healing of our relationship to the one life we all share, and for I could say this in so many ways, for the prayers that we make today to serve our own peace and serve peace in the world, and the restoration of our belonging to and intimacy with life, and the emergence of a world where all beings come home. I'd like to invoke into this space all of your and all of my ancestors and guardians and guides that are in alignment with this prayer. I'd like to invite, from the place that each of us is sitting, the energies of the directions, recognizing that each of us is facing a different direction. I'd like to invite in the east. And if you where you sit know where that is, orient in the direction of the sunrise right now in your felt sense. I'd like to invite in the east and its invitation every day to new beginnings. The south, and I believe we're all in the northern hemisphere, so the south in its invitation every day to new energy, new passion, new innovation. The west in its invitation every day to let go of what we don't need and to hold the maturity of walking through long cycles that have seasons of darkness and seasons of light, to persist, to be mature, and to call in the north and the stillness that it offers, and the gateway between this life and the next, and our trust in that gateway of life and death and service of our own lives to the longer generational arc of many lives. I'd like to invoke the sky, the atmosphere above us that gives us breath and tucks us in and holds us so sweetly to this earth, and reaching above that to the cosmos, to the greater clock that we're nested inside of, the galactic clock that we're nested inside of. And we invoke in the sky alignment with cosmic time. And then we come down to earth and invoke our non-separation with this planet we occupy, the absolute continuity between our bodies and our worldly material existence, our water, our food, our shelter, our clothing, and this earth, that our prayers align with her prayer for more life. And we call in the center. So bring your awareness to the center within you, the space beneath and behind your heart, what John O'Donohue called your point of absolute non-connectivity with anything else. And light the flame in the center of you, and connect the flame in the center of you to an imaginal center between us that is triangulated almost a functional infinity of times by all the networked connections between us that are electronic and spatial. We're going to connect that to an imaginary center that is alive and light. You can also connect it to the center of my altar that is lit here. And we enter this space to simply make prayers for ourselves and for the one life we all share. Welcome. I'd like to invite us to take an imaginal talking stick to move one person at a time, to speak prayers, the grammar of the prayer that we work with, that I work with. You can work with whatever grammar you like in your spaces, but I'll invite this here is: thank you, I'm struggling, help me. And the words I want are also welcome. They're sort of like the fourth quiet invitation to speak your prayers in personal present tense. Who would like to start? I feel a little called to call on you, Elizabeth, because I know you know this format of prayer. May I?
I'm not a Zoom literate person, so
You did great.
you want me to make a prayer first?
Would you be willing to pray
Yeah.
first? If you want to close your eyes, you're welcome to.
Okay.
Just go into the tenderness of your heart, the truth of your heart.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really grateful for whatever magic just happened, that I'm sitting here praying right now in a ceremony, and everything that came about to make this be able to happen unexpectedly and in such a beautiful container. I'm really struggling with, I'm going to say, just about everything. I can't even, I can't even imagine anything I'm not really struggling with right now, all the way from my health to the whole planet and relationships all around me and my work, and I'm on leave for stress, and I just getting over COVID, and like it's all really everything. And I need just whatever kind of gentle help I can get, and gratefully accept what help I can get, and asking also that any kind of knowledge or wisdom that I might need to pick up be shown to me in a really clear and obvious, easy to understand way. Muchas gracias.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Please just pick up next if you feel called.
I can go. I'm grateful for this moment, and for the vibration of life that I feel within me. And I'm grateful for the seeing that brings the world into my awareness. And I'm struggling with how to make sense of war, and with how much more real war is today than it ever was in my life, and also struggling with my own not seeing the earlier wars. They've always been there. And so I'm asking or praying for openings within myself and others, and asking for a more light and more meaning. Yeah.
Oh, Yuvina.
Shall I go?
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
I thank the Great Spirit for the rising sun and its transversing of the sky and its setting, and the natural rhythms, the animals, the air, the warm sun and the absence of the warm sun, and the natural rhythms. Yes. And I struggle with a broken heart about all that is being activated by the situation, or accentuated by what's going on with Israel and Palestine, and the very lengthy and convoluted tendrils. And my prayer is for a dramatic and immediate elevation of the frequency of this planet. And the only thing I really know to do to that end is to dramatically and immediately elevate my own frequency best I can. So I ask for help. Why I'm here.
Oh. Thank you, Kate. Mystic Helen Forth. Brian, we can't see you, but if you would like to pray, we'd love to hear you. Hi, welcome. I'm going to unmute you. Oh, I can only ask you. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. I'm grateful for this opportunity to come out of the shadow of being not on video. Wasn't quite expecting this, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to share in prayers with others and to include my own. Struggling with feeling connected to that place that nurtures me, feeling disconnected. When I ask for those touchstones that in the world, especially in the natural world, I'm often manifesting as people that remind me of the heart, of the path, and provide direction. It's those touchstones I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for coming out. It's nice to see you. I'll pray. Thank you. Thank you, God. God is all that is for my life, for this home that I live in that is such a good sanctuary for me, for the people in my life who I love and love me. For good breath, for health, for help, for all the help that I have in my life to do the things that are mine to do. I'm struggling to get my book done, God, and I just need your help with focus. Really refined, clear, non-dual focus and persistence. And I'm struggling with sides. It doesn't make sense to me. The manufacturing of sides, I'm struggling with that. And I really need your help. I need your help to be a clear voice, to be a space that holds and to be a space that holds unity and interbeing and communion and safety. I need your help to orient my attention where it is best in service. I really struggle with that, and I really need your help with that. Thank you. Oh, that is a complete circle of prayer. I'd like us to energetically just gently join and just send all those prayers off with a deep breath in and a full breath out. Breath is the kind of original, fastest offering into the entanglement. Who knows how quickly we will be breathing each other's molecules. And with that, we close the circle. We offer the merits of the prayers. We offer these prayers to God, to the grand organizing design. I think of God as the God self within, the God in all, and the one all at the same time. We offer these prayers to the everything, the all, the each, and the one, for the benefit of all beings at this time. And the circle is open, but not unbroken. And so it is. Thank you. Mystica, what an obvious and genius idea. Thank you. Thank you, Bina, for piggybacking that in such an obvious and genius way.
You're finding your way.
I am.
But I think it's such a good thing to find your way to do. I've been on Carson for years to offer ritual lessons, like it's important. So keep going with it, right? Like refining this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done the prayers without the teachings quite a few times. So it's lovely to thank you. So here we are. We have 5 minutes with all of us. What's alive? What questions are here? I think I'd like to highlight a few things that I think are of use. There's so many different ways to do ritual and ceremony, and I can only speak from the lens of my experience. I want to be very clear that this lens is mine, comes from my intersectionality and experience. But what I felt, one of the things I felt happen in that is as we all listen to each other, there's like a sense of a shared prayer that emerges. There's a sense both of really a care for each person's unique experience. And there's also a sense of interbeing, of emergent empathy and wholeness and one human prayer-ness that arises. And what I've seen over years is that wash cycle, it's like this methodology like this, where each person speaks and is seen, has a pro-social logic to it in terms of creating cultures of safety. And I'm passionate about that. And I felt that happen here. I felt each one of us be like, come into prayer in a way that's with you and your prayer, with you and Creator, with witness of the circle. So one of the architectures here is the circle isn't an audience, the circle is a container. And as we pray, we are that, the medicine. In Lakota, we call it the hochika, and the hochika is the circle, and the circle is a medicine. So we co-construct that medicine just by being present. And then in that, each person can have almost a solitude that then is also witnessed, that knocks at the aloneness that we each feel, because we actually can see ourselves in others and see humanness more clearly. And I felt that happen. I'd love to hear what happened for you, or what you felt happen, or if there are questions here.
I'd like to say that for me, the prayer was the happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a real moment, not an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate listening to others' prayers. And I do walk away not feeling alone in my prayers, in a sense, because of just listening. Yeah, so thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Thank you. It's a natural architecture of mutuality.
Yeah, it was really powerful to see how you could just snatch a ceremony out of the moment, and as evidence, everything that you said. And of course, that framework is so familiar to me that it really helped kind of cement, like, oh yeah, this is what's happening, and it's actually a thing. It's just it's not coming from always the participant's point of view. I'm just sort of carried along on a little whiff of whatever's happening, the energy, but thinking about it as something that's reproducible and done with intention. That was very helpful to be able to observe and participate at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad. It's really nice to pray with you. It's been a long time.
I am so sorry I need to leave because someone is waiting for me. So thank you, everyone, and God bless.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I just wanted to echo that I kind of found it useful to have the framework as you were talking about, and laying the different elements out, and and fleshing them out as you went, and then to actually do a ceremony, as just echoing what was said just before me, that it pieced it together in like just below the rational mind, like it's just experientially, it's like, yes, all the elements that you were talking about just sort of solidified in a different way. So I don't know if you'll do this again, but I found it really useful.
Sorry, I'm coughing. This is
No worries.
It's a very funny cough that happens once a day. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's nice actually for me to hear that recapitulated. Like my experience of what you just said kind of echoes what you said, of like of like, isn't that interesting how it's like how pro-social learning really is? The word you used, you didn't use the word subconscious, you used the word Like it's kind of seeped in, you said. Yeah. Yeah. And then I feel that as well. And you reflecting that. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what a lovely opportunity to learn together. I feel I met a teacher. I met him in 2019, a man named Chief Chavez. Chief Antonio Chavez. He is no longer chief. He was at the time the chief of the Lenca people, who are excuse me, a fairly large indigenous grouping that lives in Honduras, who has their living oral lineage continuously for 10,000 years. And their oral memory includes living stories of when they felt the ice age coming, and they migrated from central North America down to the Gulf Coast and built canoes and went down to Central America. And then that oral lineage includes their memory of when the conquistadors came and they navigated slavery, and then they navigated the colonization of the church, and they continued to claim their peopleness and remember their stories through all of that. And when he got on stage, he stood there and he said, you know, all of your people have been through the same things as my people. We just remember it. So thank you for being here. And his work, he works in existential risk. He works in his 2 master's degrees, and he works in Fortune 100 companies around developing resilience. And his offering was to learn the practices and the stories, to carry them like seeds, like his people did at this time. That we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that people have made it through extremely difficult times, and they've made it because they carried their stories and their seeds. And so I offer that story to you both as we close, that I think we just shared some seeds. And as they say, the Kogi say, let us continue to continue. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing this time with me.
Thank you
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
so much. What a treat. All right. Well, have a wonderful evening. Oh, warm water with honey and lemon.
Mhm.
My friend.
Absolutely. That's fine. I'm gonna go make that.
Oh my gosh. Ah, you're just such a glowing, beautiful, just what I needed. Just the medicine for me today. Thank you.
God,
Yeah.
of
I'll be in
course.
touch. And I'm going to pick up the olive oil either tonight if I have the energy, or tomorrow. And then I have a friend who's going to help me ship and do all that stuff. I can't believe I took this on, because I really am in bed with COVID most of the time. Like it's been 5 weeks, but I'm still in bed most of the time. Yeah.
Oh, Elizabeth,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's a lot of kind of autonomic, like heart stuff and all these things, and I can't shake it. But luckily there's an autonomic clinic at Stanford, so I'm working on getting a referral. And I also magically, like 4 days before I got COVID, went on disability leave for stress. So I'm like And the only thing you can do when you get that is do whatever makes you happy. That's what you're doing, getting paid to do. So it's all seeming to come together. And when I was making prayer ties for George, and I was listening to You're Going to Die podcasts, some of the most beautiful ones. And look at, oh my God, I like hammered my fingers. Can you see that? Making 300 prayer ties as
Oh my God.